Well, the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, which is a front, of course, for the CIA, has been effectively shut down now following an announcement by Elon Musk that President Donald Trump agreed to close the agency. And just this morning, you can see all of the kerfluffle outside there. I love they're saying USAID saves lives, which is hilarious to me when you think about the regime change operations around the world and how many people have died. How about the
Oh no, they're just deciding whose lives they care about.
How about the million Ukrainians who've died at their hands as a result of the regime change there? So, yeah, these protests are additionally more than 600 employees reported being locked out of the agency's computer systems today. The doors basically shuttered. You can see Democrats holding a press conference there. They have a larger budget than the CIA. They're responsible for regime change operations around the world, like in Ukraine in 2014. They were given $5 billion of your tax dollars to carry out a coup in Ukraine, of course, led by Victoria Nuland. President Trump was on the tarmac and he said, USAID is run by lunatics.
USAID, or what's going on there?
Well, it's been run by a bunch of radical lunatics, and we're getting them out. USAID, run by radical lunatics, and we're getting them out, and then we'll make a decision.
So Jamie Raskin, among other Democrats, were there at this little protest today to basically call Donald Trump a dictator and how we have to save USAID. Watch.
Elon Musk, you didn't create USAID. The United States Congress did for the American people. And just like Elon Musk did not create USAID, he doesn't have the power to destroy it. And who's going to stop him? We are. We're going to stop him.
Never mind the fact that JFK signed an executive order creating USAID, so it wasn't Congress, but don't let facts get in the way. Here's Ilhan Omar, who also had something to say about the Trump dictatorship. Listen.
We are witnessing a constitutional crisis. We talked about Trump wanting to be a dictator on day one, and here we are. This is what the beginning of dictatorship looks like. When you gut the Constitution and you install yourself as the sole power, that is how dictators are made.
Wow, it's almost like they're probably making a lot of money from USAID, that they would get out in the cold weather and give a speech like that. They must be making some money. Let's ask Peter Schweizer, president of the Governmental Accountability Institute, the author of like 100 books. Excellent books, by the way. Here's one, Secret Empires. Here's another one, Their Extortion, How Politicians Extract Your Money, Buy Votes, Line Their Own Pockets. And Peter, I think I interviewed you a number of years ago when your book on Clinton cash came out, and it's unbelievable to see how the Clinton Foundation tied to USAID, all these Democrats out there in the cold complaining and crying about it. It all kind of comes together, doesn't it, Peter? Good to see you again.
Great to see you guys, too. Thanks for having me, Leland. No, you're right. I mean, the Clintons are an example of how the political class has enriched themselves through USAID, but they are hardly the only example. And that's the problem. It's really twofold. Number one, there are certainly things that USAID has done. You talked about Ukraine that are very troublesome. But it used to be that USAID was supposed to be an extension that protected American interests. Under Barack Obama, that changed. It then became the focus of advancing the so-called millennial goals that have been established. So it no longer became about projecting American power, American influence. It became about, affecting climate change and affecting migration. So it's totally went off of its original Cold War mission. The second problem is the one you alluded to specifically, which is a lot of the money does not go to help poor people overseas. It goes to consultancies in places like Arlington, Virginia, or Bethesda, Maryland, that are run by former politicians that rake in cash doing, quote unquote, consulting work on development in these countries. With the Clintons, it happened in Haiti. With the Bidens, certainly Burisma, that corrupt energy company that Hunter Biden was involved in, they were getting support from USAID. So this is an enrichment program, not for poor people in the developing world, but for the Beltway political class.
Now, most of this is run through the State Department in the same way they use the National Endowment for Democracy to decide. And the guise of it is that other countries are so backwards, they don't know how to be a democracy. They don't know how to be progressive when it comes to women's rights and gay rights. And they need us to go and teach them this, which is an incredibly ethnocentric and arrogant mission. So what do you think? I mean, and it's false also. It's a lie. So what do you think these people protesting are actually protesting for? Is it just they don't want Donald Trump to do anything that he wants to do? Or do they actually like the idea of being the boss of the world?
Yeah, it's a great question. Obviously, I can't look into their heads. I can speculate, but I would imagine some of the people there are probably true believers, right? They actually believe that U.S. taxpayer money should be given to them and given to their allies because, of course, a lot of this money goes to non-governmental organizations upon which former USAID employees sit on the board or are actually collecting salaries. But some of them may be true believers in saying they're entitled to this and they know how to run the world. But I would argue that probably a lot of it has to do with this class of people that have set up consultancies, part of these public-private partnerships that exist to try to fix the world. And the sad fact is it has not worked. It will not work because of the problems in the developing world are oftentimes deep cultural problems related to corruption and other matters. And pumping a lot of government money into those environments is not going to improve the situation at all. So there's a lot of self-interest here. International banks, Wall Street, they love USAID-backed projects because they're guaranteed. They love USAID and other government-backed loans that happen in the developing world because it minimizes risk. And these are the people that are ultimately going to be hurt by ending USAID.
Oh, yeah. Also, it's gender ideology training in Peru. I mean, the list is endless for how much the U.S. taxpayer dollars go to these ridiculous DEI programs around the world and all of this. And someone in our chat room here just made the point. Dana says, it's not USAID. We need to remember that because you're hearing that, of course, all over TV. It's USAID. It's not. They're not. I think that we shove that name in there and make it sound like it's friendly and sharing it. But talk about the CIA connections here because Robert F. Kennedy kind of blew the lid on that, Peter, a few months ago on Tucker's show when he talked about USAID really being a front for the CIA, larger budget than the CIA, responsible for regime change operations like in Ukraine. How connected is the CIA here in USAID?
Yeah, well, the person in the chat room is quite right. It's not USAID. It's the U.S. Agency for International Development. Right. That is the official name, and it functions as supposedly developing in the developing world. And you're quite right that USAID is connected to the State Department. The State Department is kind of the preferred cover for CIA operatives operating overseas. They might be working in the embassy. They might not be in the embassy. They might be in an NGO, but USAID offers them the opportunity to carry out those policies, and it also gives them money, large sums of money. Back in the 1950s, before USAID, the CIA would have to take money out of its own coffers. It would have to get authorizations from the Intelligence Committee to spend $500 million somewhere. Now you can use aid dollars. So if you want to do something in, say, Botswana, you simply provide grants and support through NGOs to your preferred political candidate in that country. So that's how it works. So, eliminating it is, I think, a great solution. Greater transparency on our overall aid program overseas, I think, would be a great idea because there are others beyond USAID. And I think we need to have transparency not only to know what ends that money is being given, but what the results are, because these programs are rife with corruption, and we don't find out about them because of their sort of secretive nature.
But something that the Trump administration has indicated is that some of the leftovers that does not poof into the ether will be absorbed into the State Department. And we've seen signaling from Marco Rubio saying, look, we're staying in our own backyard. We're not going to go abroad and tell people how to think and how to live and try and regime change.
Do you believe him? Do we believe him?
I'm not sure I believe that, but I'm shocked to hear it out of a government official. And so is there some Could that be true, that we now honor the idea of a multipolar world, whereas live and let live, respect your neighbors and how they want to run their own countries, sovereignty, that kind of thing? Or is there some kind of fear that this ethos would be absorbed by the State Department and we'll keep doing things like this?
Or that Marco Rubio is a neocon and then his true colors will show. Like, you know.
Well, you've just led the witness.
At the end of the day.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, I don't know exactly what Marco Rubio is going to do. What I do know is this: the early signs from the Trump administration is that they're going to deal with the world in a very simple way. If you are our adversaries or our enemies, countries like Iran or China, you better be very afraid, because he's prepared to use military force if needed. That doesn't mean putting a bunch of boots on the ground, but using things like missile strikes. If you were Iran and you were going to damage the United States, we're going to come after you. But what he's also showing is he's going to deal with American allies or ostensible friends differently as well. I mean, for decades, we have dealt with countries like Mexico and Colombia and Paraguay and Uruguay, for example, by saying, hey, we'll give you aid dollars. We'll give you lots of money, and then try to help us out if you can. That has not worked out well. All you have to do is look at a country like Mexico, which is effectively run by the drug cartels, which is the gateway for fentanyl in the United States. The Mexican government's known this since the fentanyl crisis began over a decade ago, and they've done nothing. And what Trump is essentially saying to them is, we're not going to try to bribe you anymore. We're going to use a different stick, and we are basically going to say, you don't have access to our market without a big tariff unless you start doing the stuff that we're telling you to do. And the reason is, you should not take friends for granted. And countries like Mexico have taken the United States for granted. And Trump is going to change that, I think, by different tools. We're not going to throw money at you anymore. We are going to put tariffs on your goods and damage your economy if you don't cooperate. And I think that's a very good and healthy step in the right direction, and away from the USAID model of effectively trying to bribe these people, and the bribery just doesn't work.
Yeah, I think we've had it with these NGOs. You're absolutely right. Peter Schweizer has been our guest. I would encourage all of you to go wherever you buy books these days. He's got a fabulous library of fantastically written books. You can read Secret Empires, about the hidden corruption there, extortion, is Clinton cash. I mean, you want to read about the corruption in Washington, D.C., look no further than Peter Schweizer. Peter, great to see you. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on.